Okay, it's time for round two. We have 3 rows of apple seedlings to work our way through today, and we'll see about getting to the heirlooms and other named varieties maybe today, maybe next time. There's plenty in here and a lot of stuff that's fruiting this year that has never fruited before, so that's exciting. See what we can find. Okay, this apple here and up here is Wickson X Rubaiyat 13-4. I don't believe it's ripe, but we're going to try it anyway and see if we can find something that's maybe, just chase this down, maybe close to ripe. This particular combination, Wickson and Rubinet, has yielded two apples that I've already named, so it seems to be something that produces a lot of good offspring. Wow, it's really good. Dang, another one. I mean, you know, this just turned out to be so easy. I mean, I don't think I had a lot of expectations about how this project would go. I just didn't have enough data. I'm a fairly cautious thinker. But I just had a really strong feeling it was going to work out in my favor. But, to have 3 apples in a row in these trial rows that are worth naming and releasing from one cross is like pretty spectacular. I said last year, this particular cross, Wickson X Rubaiyat, because of the success I was having, and I had tasted this before, but it hadn't quite panned out. But like a lot of times when apples first start producing, they just aren't going to produce exemplary fruit. And so it just, I was hoping that this one would come into its own because it tasted promising, but never quite, didn't seem like it was ripening correctly or something. But yeah, that just, this cross alone will change the game on dessert crabs, for one thing, and just in general, propagate a whole bunch of really good apples. I mean, this tastes really good. It's a little bit savory, very rich, but still fruity. It's definitely kind of tart and refreshingly tart, but still like plenty of sugar. And I probably should just stop talking and take another bite. That thing's delicious. Let me pick another one or two. That one's a little underripe. The tartness is a little over the top. The sugar's going to go up and the acidity is going to mellow. This is very encouraging. And these are the first very good specimens I've ever had of this apple. Everything I've tasted this year has been just, leading up to ripeness and just not there. And past years, like I said, it just didn't quite seem to ripen up correctly. So these are still on the leading edge of ripeness. It is quite a tart apple. I think that in the next week, this is going to get even better. It's richly flavored, definitely tart and bright and refreshing. It's compelling. That first one I just wanted to keep. I ate most of it and I had to stop myself because I know I have a lot of stuff to taste here and I wanted to taste a couple more. But it looks like we have another winner with Wickson X Rubaiyat. The other peculiar thing about this tree is it has these like very almost yellow, very, very light green, lime green leaves. Quite peculiar, but it looks like a strong grower. It looks, nice and productive. These apples are sort of like small, but not tiny. You could see the crab genetics maybe, but they're not totally dominant. I'm going to start thinking of names for this. Whether I'll put it out this year or not, I'm not sure, but very little doubt that it's going to perform well for people and that it's worth growing. I mean, out of everything I tasted, say, in the last video, part 1 of this, this is as good and compelling as anything. Okay, so next we have cherub. Let's just grab a random cherub here. It would be interesting to do an experiment with this where you feed it to people blindfold and ask them to tell you what kind of fruit it is. Because it doesn't really taste like an apple. If so, like a peculiar one. The texture is just weird. Can you see how like saturated with juice the flesh is? It's got this weird, firm, not crisp or crunchy, not really soft either. I can't even really explain it except that it's a little bit like stone fruit. Really nice flavors, very polite, low, kind of low acid. It's not like there's no acid, but it's, it's on the polite side. Again, very much reminds me of the Shirley Temple drink that, kids get when adults are drinking adult beverages. Not much to say about that, really. Okay, so here is Tomboy. Let's see how Tomboy is held up this year, or holds up to scrutiny. And we'll just look on the ground first. I need to come out and pick up all these cherub apples and get the seeds. It looks like there's a couple of Tomboy crab here on the ground that fell off. And that one looks overripe. This one actually looks about right. Yeah, that is a sweet, sprightly, delicious little crab apple. Now this one looks really good. You see how all the light parts have turned kind of a golden or warmer color, not so green and harsh. I mean, I had enough confidence in this, last year to name it and release it. That's how good it was. Checking this year to make sure that wasn't a premature move. Yeah, it's delicious. In terms of the savory flavor, these do not have anywhere near the level of that Wickson has, and all of these are ripe enough for me to tell that they aren't going to ever. However, they do have a little bit of it, and it helps really round out the flavor and make them much richer flavored apples. Growing out more of these, like last year I think I saved, it was like 125 seeds or something, this cross alone, of which I was going to grow out like half of them, but I decided not to because I was just growing out too many apple seeds. Just imagine if I got 3 of these in a row. In fact, they're the only apples of this particular cross that I have, period, in the whole orchard. And all 3 of these are, imagine what's going to come out of those 100 and whatever seeds I sent out and the 20 something I grew. These actually look pretty good this year. Like last year was a little, russety and kind of lumpy. And that's part of the reason I chose the name Tomboy, is kind of rough on the outside and sweet and pink on the inside kind of thing. Anyway, yeah. And as we've seen so many times before, it barely had any, it had less pink flesh early on, and as the tree is maturing, it looks like it may be showing more pink flesh, and I think that's it's a thing, and that's cool, because the more it develops, the more of those kind of like complex fruit flavors it's going to have, and the cooler it is, but it's pretty cool. The one last thing I'll say about, these 3 crosses of Wickson X Rubaiyat that are all just seem, very good. I mean, we have chestnut crab, we have Wickson, trailman, centennial, we have this handful of dessert crabs. And, I've heard of a few others, but those are the only ones I own that are, compete with each other in terms of like dessert quality for crab-derived apples. So what I mean by crab is both that they're small, but they actually have genetics in them from something besides what we think of as a normal apple. Whatever that is, I'm not sure, but it's kind of obvious that there's something going on there. These apples all compete with that bar where it's set now. Now, if I grew out 100 of these in a row, I'm not going to name all 100 of them, no matter how good they are, right? So then the bar is going to be reset, and that's really what's going to happen next. So any one of these, or all of them, may not survive that process of improvement, right, in terms of like them being dropped along the way. And that's totally fine, because I'm not conservative about this stuff. I'm about improvement. My whole life, my whole outlook on everything is about like everything can be improved. So that's the entire point, is to take whatever this gives us and try to move it forward in some way, that you just get something that stomps everything else, or causes us to drop things along the way. Let's get in here, and this apple is really short. Sweet 16X Rubinet 1313. Ugh. Oh my God, that's awful. Now, if you really, really like red apple flavor, this is like, yeah, on steroids, but with some of that sweet 16 complexity. Yeah, it's quite curious. I mean, some people would probably go nuts over that flavor. To me, I'm just like, ugh. Yeah, very American red apple with added complexity and very high intensity. Ugh, I just want to get that out of my mouth. It's got this sort of bitterness that Sweet 16 gets. Especially, it seems to be associated with the anise flavor, which there's a little bit of in here. But yeah, it'll get this weird, strange bitterness that I'm not too fond of either. Like I said, some people may like it, but you probably will never get a chance to taste it because I'm not sending it to anybody. Look what I brought today. Reading glasses. Yeah, I thought so. It's 13.4. Overripe, mealy, tannic, soft. Okay, nothing really on that one to taste except that one apple. So I'm not going to call it, but it's almost certainly going to be a call. And I'm going to call this gross Sweet 16 seedling. You know what? Let's get a sugar reading on Tomboy crab. So we're taking out this sickly tasting, disgusting thing. Sweet 16 X Rubaiyat 13.1. Now, if this is the apple I think it is, it's extremely promising. Like, I've been super excited about it since the first, since last year I tasted it. And I'm not sure what kind of state it's in, but we're going to find out. It looks a little green. But I'm not even sure that the apples I ate, like off the ground, were actually from this tree right here. But this was my best guess. It could be the next tree. All right, well, this is green, but we're going to try it anyway. Nothing to report there. As you can see, I tried to do some breeding with this, even though I wasn't even sure it's the right tree. That's how excited I am about it. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that is ready enough to even tell what it's going to be like. And it had a lot of blooms on it, and I thought it had a lot of fruit on it, but there really isn't much. 13.9. I don't know. Not very good. Not really bad. A little bitter. Still kind of underripe. Not sure. Okay, sugar reading on Tomboy. I'm glad to see Tomboy doesn't have any water core this year because, well, certainly Cherub will get quite a bit of water core. Some people like water core and some people hate it. I'm kind of like more on the don't like it end. 19% sugar. It tastes sweeter than that. Not that that's low, mind you, but for here it's not particularly high. The kind of dry farm type of conditions I have, although this year is a little bit wetter, so Sweet 16X Rubaiyat 13.5 has plenty of fruit on it. This looks overripe. Very. It's actually really good flavor. We missed the boat on this one. It's soft now, but it does have a very high flavor, very complex, very fruity. It looks promising. You know, I definitely wouldn't want to cut that out now without tasting it in its season, which I probably did. But, you know, it's just so hard to remember all this stuff. It's just too much if I'm not actually taking notes. Sweet 16 X Rubaiyat 13.10, or could be King David X Rubaiyat, it says. Looks the same, overripe. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm going to cut that out without tasting it again in its season, which must have been like earlier this month or last month. Sweet 16 X Rubaiyat, or could be King David 13.11. Oh, that has that nasty Sweet 16 gone bad thing. Sweet 16 is it's just such a weird apple. I'm kind of giving up on trying to actually grow it to eat. In a good year, it's just so delicious and like all these wonderful flavors. And then as soon as it goes over the hill or in a bad year, it just flips and it has all these kind of sickly, sweet, cloying red apple. Yuck. So we have a nice looking apple. These are a little bit over the hill. Let's see if we can find one that's less ripe. But it still has that style with like American red apple, some of the red delicious flavor. I just don't like that kind of apple at all. Some people might like this apple. I don't really care. They're not going to get to taste it because that would require me tasting it again, and I don't ever want to taste it again. Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.8. It has quite a bit of flavor, but there's something weird in the flavor. It tastes like it's close to ripe, close enough to tell what it's going to do. It's weird, like, look how all the leaves have fallen off already on this part of this branch. It grows funny. Aside from like juicing or cider, which I just don't think. There's a potential this could make really amazing juice or cider, but I don't think there's anything special enough to warrant keeping it. I'm on the fence about this one. Calling it out. Now this looks really weird. It looks like a quince. Greasy, very peculiar flavor. I just feel like this one, it just grows too weird. So I'm gonna take both of these out. There's so many apples that are just like, oh, that could be good cider. And it does have a very rich flavor, but I just think we can do better. And since it grows really funny and the apples mostly don't look healthy, and I've noticed that before, like just tons of cracked apples on this tree. Look how they get tiny at the top because like there's no leaves and it's sickly and like maybe dying up here. But it's always been weird like that. It just doesn't seem genetically like a winner. Next is Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.9. High tannin, very puckery. Pretty good flavor and a fair amount of it, but not really ripe yet. So another week or 3 on that one. Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.4. Yellow green apple. Medium to high tannin. Soft flesh, fine grained. Tastes like high sugar, but also fairly low acid. Good flavor though. I'm sure if you press juice out of this, it would have a lot of flavor. And it tastes like a lot of sugar, but it would be cider and juice only. It's actually very similar to this one I just decided to call that is mostly yellow. Like it almost looks like the same apple. It's the same cross. And it also is losing all its leaves at the top early. Like almost like I accidentally grafted 2 of the same seedling. The first one is more firm, less flavorful. It looks like, again, just like a really weird grower. I don't like the growth habit at all. That's going to. We can do better, I'm telling you. We can get apples that are as good as this for cider that are better in other ways. We probably already have some in those Wickson Rubaiyat crosses. Okay, Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.2. These are a little bit bigger and more interesting. Fine-grained, waxy, tart, very tannic. Flavor very peculiar. Can't describe it, but peculiar. Not quite ripe, so we'll revisit that. So Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.6. Looks like a Cox's Orange Pippin Cherry Cox offspring with these big painterly paint stripes. Neither ripe nor promising. I have a feeling that one's gonna fall by the wayside. So far, Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat is not yielding a lot of interesting apples. Cherry Cox X Rubaiyat 13.3, very bitter. Not just tannic, like pretty high tannin, but actually bitter. Lots of scab. This could be a 5 out of 5 for scab susceptibility. Flavor's not particularly great. Okay, I think we're into Laxton Epicure. Well, I call it not Laxton's Epicure because it was labeled as Laxton's Epicure, but it just didn't seem like it actually is, so I just call it not Laxton's. Not Laxton's Epicure. X grenadine 12.3. All these high tannic acid apples are, my whole inside of my mouth feels dried out. It's like affecting my ability to speak because literally my cheeks are so dry and puckered up that they're sticking like to my teeth while I'm trying to talk. So I use this not Laxton's because it has some really nice flavors, like these kind of artificial fruit type of flavors that I'm always into. But so far, this row of crosses has not yielded much of interest. Yeah, I can tell already. And you know, this isn't the first time I've tasted most of these, and every time I taste them, I'm like, yeah, that's a loser, that's a loser. I think they're all going to be culls. So in that case, like if I decide to cull all this whole section of those crosses, you know, I might take out every other tree and then use the remaining trees to propagate some other seedling varieties or something. Use them to grow scion wood or replicate some of the better trees in here. So I have more trees, more fruit, more scion wood. That one's got a nice rich flavor. It has really high tannins, and I don't really think it's a dessert apple or a cider apple. It doesn't matter what that is because it's going to get cut out. Not Laxton's X grenadine 12.1. Nice little pretty red apples, like all of them. Yeah. Again, tannic, mild, bland. You lose. I know, life isn't fair. Well, like I said, you know, if we decide to keep this one, I'll look at what the tag says. Otherwise, I'm just going to mark it as a cull. Really pretty apples, though. I remember when these first started ripening, I was looking at them going, wow, these look great. Super dark red. It's soft, overripe. A little bit of pink blush. Tastes like a gross, overripe American red apple, though. That Not Laxton's definitely has that type of characteristic to it. And I've tasted all these before. I really dislike that. I'm a loser. That's what they said. That's what they said. And now we're into Rubaiyat X Pink Lady 13-1. All right. Well, let's see what that tastes like. Now, one of these Pink Lady X Rubaiyat crosses I called out really early because it was just really bad. Bland, icky, sweet flavors. Rubaiyat X Pink Lady, so I did this cross in both directions apparently, 13-5. It's very puckery. I mean, I have to ask myself, this has cider potential. It's got some pink flesh. Not a lot. It is quite tart. I could see this making excellent, for instance, applesauce. It may even be too tart for that. But as like a bitter sharp, you know, it's fairly tannic. I mean, it's not like over the top high tannin, but it's definitely tannic. And it's quite acidic. And it's got that pretty pink tinge to the flesh, you know, definitely not a cull. Okay, now we are to Pinker Lady, as I've been calling it. And this apple has had me on a roller coaster this year. So, you know, I've been really, really looking forward to tasting a bunch of these apples. They're just beautiful. It's been really intriguing in the past. It can be very large. These aren't super big because I let this tree bear so much this year. I picked one where like the calyx had turned brown. That's like an indication of ripeness sometimes. And I ate that and I was like, wow, this is even more promising than I thought. It had a really nice tartness to it and, you know, decent flavor. And then most of the ones I've had since have been kind of bland and disappointing. So let's find out what's going on here. I'm not really sure how ripe they are. The other thing is like this tree is really young and really small and has a lot of competition. So maybe by producing just a huge amount of fruit, the overall fruit quality was just really watered down by lack of resources, right? Competition of resources. For apples that I'm especially excited about and I think have a lot of potential to really go somewhere, you know, maybe not in the commercial market, but, you know, possibly, but just in general, I'm more inclined to hang on to them for a while, to fruit them for more years. So this is one of those apples, you know, because look, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous apple. It's got this pretty pink flesh and the quality can be very high and very interesting and intriguing. I've had really good feedback from people, but again, like this year, it's just been kind of bland. You know, there may be some good apples and some bad apples on the tree, but I have a feeling it's not overall going to like improve. Like it's not going to get more acidic. Like if they're lacking in acid, which is something about this variety, it can be a little too polite that way. That's not going to improve. So this has really nice texture. If anything, it's a bit starchy still. The color's decent. You know, another thing that I've always noticed about this apple is it has a really easy to eat texture. It's got this kind of, you know, crispy, fine grained texture, but as you eat it, it just crushes up into juice really easily. You know, it's not a lot of work to eat. But yeah, especially after tasting all these other apples, and the last apple I tasted was especially tart, right? So that resets my taste buds even more. Yeah, it tastes bland, and it's never a super high flavored apple, but it has very pleasant flavors. And even a lot of that's not coming through. It just seems a little too mild. Now, if I put this in my fridge and I haven't eaten anything for a while, or, you know, haven't eaten any fruit or acid things, I may very much enjoy this more. And so that's like right now, I'm actually going to pick a couple just to put in my fridge and taste later to see, you know, what they taste like when my taste buds are less blown out. Look at these. Gorgeous. You know, it's got that pinkish red thing that Pink Lady has, but even more of it. They're more red and maybe prettier, and then with some of these big speckles. Wow. really a looker, but we'll see. You know, I'm not letting it go this year for sure until I get a better idea of what's going on with that thing. Here's one on the ground. I'll pick that up too. So a little disappointing on Pinker Lady. No deal breakers yet, but I'm like kind of annoyed and glad that I didn't let it go yet. Okay, I think we're into Rubinet and Rubaiyat crosses. Rubinet x Rubaiyat 13-2. I've never been impressed with these crosses. I pretty much have been thinking all along that I'm going to take all these out. I think there was one over here that I thought maybe I would keep, but probably all going to get cut out. They just don't have anything going that I want. Here's another one. Yeah, same cross. I'm not sure which direction because I can't read it, but it's 13-2. Some are Rubinet Rubaiyat, some are Rubiat Rubinet. The first one is always a seed parent, and the second one's the pollen parent. Oh yeah, super not into that. Rubinet x Rubaiyat 13-5. Pretty kind of tannic. Maybe not quite ripe yet. I'm not really into that. It lacks character. Now we're to this curly-leaved apple, which I believe is one of those crosses as well. Rubinet x Rubaiyat 13-3. This apple has been decent. Like, it's kind of just an apple. Okay, well, first off, the leaves. So you can see that these leaves are different. You know, they have this curly margin, and it varies. Like you can see here, this isn't too pronounced. This one, it's very pronounced. This one, it's very pronounced. And I just noticed that whenever I talk about this apple, people comment and they're interested. They seem very curious about it, and people have asked me for it, and so I thought, well, I should give it a second look, really. And this year, it finally bore a bunch of good fruit. And the fruit's not bad. I mean, it's not, it doesn't stand out in any way. Well, it has very white flesh. Yeah, overall, I would say, to me, it's better than any of these other Rubinet Rubaiyat crosses. But it's not special in any way. You know, it's kind of apple where I'd run across it and say, well, I'm not going to cut this down yet, but otherwise, I'm probably not ever going to send it out or anything. But people are especially interested in this trait. So maybe I'll end up giving it a funny name and shipping it out to some people if you want to try it. But yeah, it's not an exciting apple, but it has potential. Like if you wanted to carry this trait forward, it's not a bad apple. Like it's as a canvas on which to start and add some more interesting characteristics and flavors and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. And it's actually kind of pretty. It's got some nice russeting on the top. It's got sort of this, kind of rough, rustic. It's got a kind of a rustic, antique-y, old school apple look. But if I was out hiking and I found some of these, I would eat some and enjoy them. I might even take a few home, but I probably wouldn't bring a cutting home to graft. It's just right in the middle there where it's like, it's a good apple, it's decent. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's not special either. Oh yeah, and then there was one more of these that I actually cut down and I regrafted, and I'm growing scion wood on this. Yeah, so I grafted this stump, which was very productive. Big, pretty apples. They just weren't good. So now I have a bunch of the musky apple there. Okay, this one has been fruiting for quite a few years. It's a red-fleshed apple. Oh, well, that's Rubiat Rubinet too. So this one has been kind of promising in a way. Maybe it's some kind of cooking or sauce apple. I would never guess this is the same apple I've tasted off this tree for years. Like pretty bright pink flesh, acidic. Like I'm looking to see if maybe I picked that off the wrong tree. I don't think so. There we go. Now see, this one doesn't even taste ripe. I'm not going to cut this down because it somehow still intrigues me, but it's always the same of almost impressive, almost impressing me. This one's actually really good. I mean, this specimen here. This apple has some of the worst burnout I've ever seen on a seedling. Just terrible, terrible burnout. Rubiat x Rubinet 13-1. Yeah, I kind of want to finish this one. I'm not ready to name it and send it to anyone else. Okay, first row down. That was the hard row. These rows here, these two are, they're newer, so there's fewer fruits and way less crowded. Okay, this one is fruiting. It's unimpressive. I don't really know what to say about it. It's boring. It just says orphan 1511. Tastes like it might be a sweet 16 seedling. Since the tree is so weak and this is probably its first year fruiting, I'll just, I'll just leave that. I won't be deciding to cull too many of these newer fruits, just a few. Another orphan, 15.4. Also tastes like a sweet 16 seedling. Seems kind of boring, but again, it's a little too early to be cutting these out. But I'm pretty sure I will be cutting that out. No fruit, no fruit, no fruit, no fruit, no fruit, no fruit. Quite a few of these bloomed this year. I think most of them did, but a lot of them didn't set any fruit, or maybe just one or two. And either it already ripened and fell off, or the birds got it, or something like that. So here's a real primitive looking Mapole cross. Let's see what that is. I think it's probably pink parfait. Yeah, Mapole x pink parfait 15.8. These little, primitive looking crabs. You can see this bark is really weird. It's all checkered. It looks like maybe like persimmon bark or something. Some kind of genetic throwback to its crab genetics. You certainly could throw this in your juice or cider, but I don't see a lot to recommend it. It's fairly tannic, somewhat acidic, but I don't think the sugar is very high. I just don't think it has a lot to offer anyone for anything. And there's another one right next to this that I'm more interested in here. Or I have been more interested in this one in the past. Yeah, see, this is more promising. Okay, this one's Mapole x Pink Parfait 15. It's all scratched out. It says 8 and 9, but they're both scratched out. 1376 16 question mark. I don't know. Anyway, it's Mapole x Pink Parfait. Let's try another one. We'll keep an eye on this one. It does have this really red flesh. It's kind of soft, and I'm getting it a little bit late. Let's see, I think there's one more here. Look at that. Just look at that color. For whatever reason, I want to keep eating this. It reminds me of a pomegranate, both the way it looks and a little bit in the flavor. I don't know what to make of it yet. I feel like I need to fruit it more. I'm going to get this one out of there, give that one a little more space. We'll try this and see if that needs to be cut out or not, and let it fruit some more. But for some reason, even though it's got this really fine grain, but it's kind of getting mealy and it's pretty soft, but I want to keep eating it. Whatever the thing is, like, going through all these apples just now, there's very few apples in here, even ones where I'm like, oh, that's interesting, that maybe, this is the one I want to keep eating. Why? I don't know. Like, the texture is not good, but it's also not really bad. It's weirdly soft, but super juicy. At some point, it kind of doesn't matter whether I can analyze why I want to keep eating it or not. There's something about the flavor and the whole package that makes me want to keep eating it, and that's what I'm always looking for the most. It also has this beautiful, upright, healthy new shoot here, so I'm going to train that this year. I'll actually try to train that into a good tree form, and maybe I'll probably end up taking most of this stuff out, so maybe that'll be its own freestanding tree someday. But yeah, look at that color. Yep, I want to keep eating it. Okay, this one is Mapole x Pink Parfait 15.5. So here's the genetic variation we can get in that same cross. And then this one was too, and it's got this weird checkered bark, and big difference. Well, I will say that this has an interesting kind of musky and somewhat complex fruity thing going on. The fruit can be quite large. When I first saw this, on this little dwarfish looking tree, because this does have some of the columnar trait. It's on the large side, but it certainly has some of those traits to it. It's only bent over because it had so much fruit on it this year. And I saw these big fruits and I got pretty excited because, that'd be pretty neat. But they haven't really panned out. I tried some last year. I tried them again this year. Not ready to cut it out, but I don't think it's gonna make it. I think that these are, these are the fruits. Here, imagine. Yeah, I will say it does have this very complex, fruity thing going on that I really like a lot and that, I'm always looking for. Who knows? I'm going to leave that one for now. Yeah, there's a bunch of those Mapole crosses in here. This is another one that you can see has a kind of a dwarf habit, but there's no fruit on it. This apple, Mapole X Chestnut, it bore a lot of fruit, and I just remember tasting this over and over again and thinking it's just an apple, like it's just an okay apple. But again, we'll not cut that out. I think this one was kind of the same. Pink Parfait X Rubaiyat 1513. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be any good, but I'm not going to cut it down quite yet. But I'm almost certain I will cut it down. Very sweet, not well balanced. Too tannic, a little bit bitter. Oh, I'm tempted. There's no way I'm going to keep that. The bar is set too high to keep that. There's a bunch of stuff here that nothing's fruiting in there. Okay, here's some Mapole crosses fruiting that a bunch of these are columnar. There's a section of them here. And they're almost all going to be culls. I've tasted a lot of these more than 1 year. Crabby, low sugar. It's not horrible, but it's not useful either. Just kind of hoping this one might turn out good. It's got a bunch of apples on it. It's very stunted, but like one of those apples back there is really big. There isn't much I can say about that. It doesn't have the columnar habit, but it does seem kind of dwarfy. I mean, it's tiny little tree. Look at that. I'll leave it for now, but it's edible but unremarkable. No fruit on this one. I don't remember if it fruited this year or not. This one I've tasted enough to know that's a complete cull. Very, very crabby. Here's a red one with the dwarf columnar habit. Bitter. Ugh. I mean, I've tasted this multiple years. Honestly, I just don't know that there's anything to do with this. Let's take a sugar reading because it seems like the sugar is really low, but I can't really be sure because it might just be so crabby that I can't tell what's going on. Yeah, it's 14% compared to like we're getting like 19 to 22. And for having such red flesh, it just doesn't have the red flesh flavor. It's just not there. This one's a cull. It's terrible. Bland. Bitter. So this one has a very promising form, but honestly the apples are bad. At their best, they're very low in sugar. They're quite sour, but this one has like this probably is responsible for bending this branch down, but typically it has this very upright, almost no side branches are the ones it has are very short. I have, pictures on like Instagram or whatever, or videos of this just being a mass, like a bunch of grapes on both of these. Because this one is so stubby. See how fat it is and upright? That it might actually be a form that would hold up to these large, and it did, hold up to these large amounts of fruit. You come along here, pick all those really quick. It's not going to get very high, and if you want to control it for size, it's going to be easy. You can plant them super close together this way, and if they're short, you can plant the rows closer together, and I just think there's a lot of potential there for this form. The apple itself, not impressive. It could be something that's worth working with. I'm over this rain thing. My stuff is getting wet enough to be annoying, so I'm going to bail out and finish this later. That rain's gone. Back on the job this morning. We're going to start at the far end of this last row and work our way back to where we were. As you can see here, I have a columnar red flesh crab. That's a Mapole seedling. Unlike the other one I just showed you yesterday that's real short and stubby and blunt, this one is much taller. It has been bearing fruit for about 3 years. It's falling over from fruit weight. And so this one would clearly, like if you're growing this in an intensive system, you would clearly have to for sure stake it. Now, I'm not saying you wouldn't have to stake the other one, but I'm just saying that it could maybe be possible to create varieties that are freestanding of these dwarf columnars. It is quite sour and tannic, but overall it's better than those other two red-fleshed apples. So I don't think this one has a tag. So the second parent is unknown, but from the way it tastes, it actually has more berry flavor than most of those Mapole crosses throw. It could be crossed with another red-fleshed apple. I've been tempted to cut this one out, but I think I'm going to leave it. It's closer. It's a better apple than Mapole, for instance. It's bigger, it's tastier, it's less crabby, although it's still fairly crabby. And while it does have this thing where it's kind of tall and it's already falling over, overall the form is very interesting, right? I mean, it's very columnar. There really are no side shoots to mention. I mean, the only things I see are really like fruiting spurs. They're like maybe a couple of inches long. There's one shoot here, but that's, coming out of the base, and it's just going to turn into another one of these. The form is interesting, and, I wouldn't say I would never cross it with something to find out what happens, especially since it has some of these berry aromatics. And of the ones I've looked at, aside from the new one that I'm going to name and release for juice, which is not red fleshed, this is maybe the best of the lot for the ones that are actually columnar. Yeah, with just a few adjustments, this would actually be kind of good. And I'm kind of looking forward to tasting over the next few weeks and seeing what it does. Also good texture too. Yeah, and I'm seeing a bunch of apples on the ground here. That looks like Pinker Lady. That's Pinker Lady. It must have, yeah, that rolled down here. That's pretty good. It has very candy-like flavor, very low acid though. And the flavors are not really strong and persistent, but they're very, very pleasant. Actually, very delicious. We should revisit Pinker Lady before we taste this chestnut grenadine cross, because my palate is still fresh, right? Really, the worst time to taste this apple, because it's kind of on the mild side, is after tasting a whole bunch of other apples. So let's go check that out again. Here's what I think the deal is with this apple. First of all, it's actually really delicious, and the flavors are on the mild side. As you can see, it doesn't have a lot of pink flesh. The parts with more pink flesh, the more pink flesh it develops in certain years, the more flavor it's going to have. If I had to characterize it, it would be like generic berry, fruity kind of flavors. Maybe like a hint of strawberry sometimes, like fake strawberry. But, it's low acid. I think it's always going to be lowish acid. It's not going to ever be like a real high acid apple, which is great for some people and not for others. The flavor being on the light side, like when an apple develops poorly, like this one isn't as well developed and is not as flavorful, it's just going to come off as kind of weak. And what will affect that in the long run, I don't know. But, my overall impression of this apple has always been that it's fairly polite and it's not like a strongly flavored apple. However, it's really fun to eat. Like, I definitely want to keep eating this one and the one I just put down before. The texture is really fun. It's like right now it's pretty crisp. And again, it's just very easy to eat. It crushes up really easy and like doesn't have a lot of pulp. The skin is pretty thin. The tannin is low. It's a very polite apple. Again, if you're not like tasting other apples all day and not going from like this here, which is just an acid monster, straight to this, I think if I handed this to most people cold, they would be very, very enthusiastic about it and, eat it up because it's quite delicious. Yeah, it's really great. So, that's encouraging. It just is what it is. It's like every other apple. It has its quirks and flaws and issues, and that's its issues. Just being a little bit maybe too polite to survive the worst conditions or years or palates or something. But as far as like, is it worth growing and eating? Oh, hell yeah. It's a great apple. And I have a feeling that, on a better tree with more light and thinned out more so that there's just not so much heavy. I mean, you're not seeing much now, but I really let a lot of apples go on this tree. Also, it does drop a lot of apples early. So that's an issue with this apple, a lot of early drops. But yeah, it was really loaded. So with like fewer fruits under better conditions, it may just develop more richness and flavor. Then again, with like a lot of water, it might just blow up into a flavorless, tasteless, useless thing. I will have to find out. Also, definitely using that for further breeding. Grenadine X Chestnut, 15-1. And let's try this one. Very dense. It's kind of browning and messed up in here. It's all brown. So it probably got a little sunburn just sitting up here. It literally tastes like wine. I mean, I think it's literally fermented on the tree into wine. It doesn't have a lot of sugar. It's hard to tell what the flavor is with all that fermentation going on. I'm going to leave this one a little bit longer because I just don't know what to think of this. It's super dense, like just really, really dense. And it's not crisp at all. It just cleaves off in these big, almost rubbery, hard chunks. Okay, here we are at the musky apple. Now, this apple's in terrible shape. You know, it's half dead, and it still managed to pull off a decent crop of apples this year. I have already picked some up off the ground. I'm going to try to find one that looks like it's pretty ready here. And I'm hoping we don't get too much water core, though it looks like I can see some. Rubaiyat X Pink Parfait 15.6. Man, this thing is pretty amazing. It is very musky, like strongly forward musky. Like anyone who ate it would be like, what's up with that? Like, what is that weird flavor and what's going on here? But on top of that, or with that, it also has a lot of very strong kind of fruity type of flavors that I couldn't really necessarily nail down. The first year I tasted it, I thought it was like watermelon, like artificial watermelon. Let me try again. So I don't know what this, fruit flavor is, but it blends really, really well with the musky flavor, almost like they're the same thing, like they're not different flavor components. It's quite interesting. Man, it's delicious. Okay, another thing about it, very, very fine grain and crispness. So it's firm and it's crisp, but it's not hard to chew up. It's hard to explain. It cleaves off in big chunks, but then when you're chewing it, it goes down real fast into juice, and the skin is also very thin and unoffensive and doesn't require a bunch of extra work to chew up like it does in some apples, or many apples really. Just overall, this is just a winner. I mean, every year I've tasted it, I've been like, wow, that's really interesting. I really like the musky flavor. I think that's got to be like its own classification of apples. Like, I don't know of other apples, any famous apples that are known to have that characteristic. I'm sure there are some, and I just don't know. It's not widely known, certainly. I'm going to name this muskmelon. I've already been calling it that. I just didn't want to tell everyone. I mean, there's a couple people that know, because I said it in a video before, and I was like, oh, I should call this muskmelon because of the musk, but also that, there's maybe a melon-like component, and originally I thought it tasted like watermelon. It's just a really fun and cool name. So this is going to be muskmelon. Will I have scions this year? Probably. I grafted out in numerous places, but I definitely grafted it over to a stump over here that grew really well. So I should have a decent amount of scionwood to list on figbid.com, and that will happen in the winter time. If you're not only following my content and don't know, the best way to find out about when I put on scions and seeds for sale and pollen is Patreon, follow my blog, Instagram, Facebook. And of course here, you can always watch my content, but no guarantees here that I'll get some video out in time saying, oh, it's time. Rubaiyat Pink Parfait, same cross as muskmelon, 15.2. I'm seeing a lot of water core on this tree. Thick skin, high tannin, not a great flesh texture, kind of dry. Okay flavor, but nothing to write home about. I'm very unsure that this is actually ready. Let's pick this badly water cored specimen here. That's all water core. See? Just saturated. Try to find a spot where there isn't any water core because it has its own flavor. You know what? This apple looks intriguing to me. There are some more on the trees. Given that Rubaiyat and Pink Parfait are both late, and Pink Parfait can be super late, it has considerable pink flesh here showing through this translucent yellow skin, so it's actually quite interesting looking. And it may very well not only develop more this year, but as the tree matures and fruits more and gets healthier and a bigger root system and able to support good fruit, these fruits could change and improve quite a bit. So yeah, I'm actually kind of intrigued by this. It's Rubaiyat X Pink Parfait 15.2. Sweet 16 X Wickson 15.9. Well, it's extremely juicy. It's not particularly sweet. The flesh is kind of tender and just really easy to eat. Not soft really in a bad way, but I could see it maybe not improving any. Well, this one's a little different and more interesting. Same tree. This definitely has some of Wickson's savory flavor, but it also has some like traditional red apple flavor for people who like that. And that's a combination that I'm not sure I've even ever tasted before in an apple. Yeah, I mean, I think this one should be allowed to fruit more years, and we'll see what it does. Yeah, that's actually quite savory. So This is a tree that is definitely going to be in the savory apple category. It's not strongly savory like Wickson. This one's weaker than the last one, but I have a feeling as this tree again matures and comes into its own, it'll probably start producing better fruit. So we're going to have a bunch of these Sweet 16 X Wicksons here. This one is number 15-8. A lot of them have been kind of like really tame and boring. Not this one. That's actually quite delicious. This apple has a lot of flavor, a lot more than that last one. It's really nicely tart and but very sweet. The flavors are rich, but I'm not sure I could nail them down. Bottom line, I want to keep eating this. It's actually really tasty. It does have some water core, so I'm not sure how that's affecting the flavor. Well, I'll say the water core plays well with this apple. It has a very nice flavor. Let's see, we can find some more of these. There's at least a pineapple-like quality to this apple, if not an actual flavor, even without the water core, and I think the water core just kind of accentuates that. There's no water core here. Well, I'm going to save the seeds from these, throw them in the fall blend. Yeah, so another apple I would definitely like to keep an eye on over the coming years. I should get out here and take some of these, clean them up, uncrowd them now that they're bearing, prune them back a little, train them a little bit, stake them up, and see what they do. So the next one is going to be yet another one of these. Let's taste the apple, and then we'll trace down the tag. That is really boring. Pretty flavorless. I'm really confused about what's what in here. This one I've already tasted enough, and it's a cull. You can see I put some bags on here for pollination because I thought it was actually a different apple, and I got confused. And the apple I thought it was one over here that doesn't have any fruit on it anymore. I think it must be this one. I have to look back at my notes to be sure. And I'm wrong yet again. This is so confusing. I really need to get in here and just clean this stuff up because I can't tell what's what. So 15-8 is the one that's already done. It's a much earlier apple. I've seen it ripen as early as August. 15-9 was something to just kind of keep an eye on. It's got really boring little apples down here, but the ones that I got up here were more maybe like, oh, maybe we can take a second look at that. Hopefully I can sort all that out later. Okay, here's another one. Little, interesting. Look how that has the five-pointed star shape. How many of these have it? That has it. A little lumpy. That definitely has it. Interesting. The ones I just tasted varied from like kind of intriguing to too much red apple flavor to I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm not going to call it this year, and I'm very interested in this 5-star trait. That can express sometimes to a much greater degree to where these are more like lobes. But even this one is quite attractive. And if you can imagine maybe reading like a cute little red-fleshed, super sweet crab apple with that star shape, I think that's pretty intriguing. So could be useful for that. And I do have one more star-shaped apple, but I think this one's actually better quality. Okay, so this empty tree here is Twang, and Twang is going out into the world this year because it's very early. It's August, not July, but it's early, and it turned out to make a really good pie apple, which I've been thinking about for a long time, and I finally got around to testing it this year. So I have this as a pie apple, Twang, in August. Just as Twang is tailing off, there's another one of these Williams Pride X Wickson that comes in, and it is also a good pie apple, and that's this one here, which I named Integrity. They taste similar, they keep their shape in baking, and as far as like, if I think about all the apples I have here on the homestead in those seasons, like this is probably what I would use the most to make a pie. So, pretty cool. So Twang and Integrity will also be going out this year. Let's go back here to amber wine. You can see here it's got this nice amber coloring. Wow. Very dense, very sweet, like syrupy sweet, low acid. Quite a bit of tannin though. This year the skin is pretty thick and it's fairly tannic. I've had this apple be much more of a like light, crisp eating apple. Let's try this one here. So with the lack of acidity, it's kind of cloying. It's like eating a chunk of sugar, basically, with some of that savory flavor in it. That's always been an issue with this apple. It's definitely low acid apple, but it usually has more than this and it's more balanced. I think I'm catching them a little bit on the late side here. I have eaten some and I think they're more that way. And, you know, the riper they get, the less acidic they're going to get. Really enjoyed eating these this year with like aged cheddar cheese. The savoriness of the apple complements the savoriness of the cheese. Very, very tasty. Let's try one more here. We need to test this sugar content here. So typically in the past, I definitely enjoy eating these out of hand a lot more. But this year they're just kind of lacking the acidity too much. Pretty just dead sweet. I was talking to Mr. Chickadee and I sent him some scions to graft at his homestead. He was saying his wife really likes no acid in her fruit, like just really, really sweet fruit. So she might like this one. I'm pretty sure he has it already. It's really, really hard to tell sugar levels by tasting because the acid changes the entire game. If it's high acid, it's going to not taste nearly as sweet. And if it's low acid, it may not even be that high in sugar and taste very sweet. I'm not any good at it, I can tell you that. $18. I'm definitely interested in getting this apple fruiting on a big healthy tree. But as far as eating, you know, right now it's pretty disappointing just because it's just not enough acid to make it a balanced eating experience like I'm used to with this apple. It definitely isn't always balanced, but it's not like, you know, extremely lopsided like it is this year. Or right now. You know, the ones I've been eating, I ate earlier, were definitely better, although I think it did really have a tendency to be lower in acid this year than it usually is. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Williams Pride X Wickson 15.8 here. I don't know what to think of this. That's kind of good, but kind of weird and kind of not. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm just going to leave this tree here and keep growing it. See if it catches my attention later. But these hang on the tree really well. The texture is still good. It just has a very strange flavor once you eat it a little bit. And the first bite isn't really telling of what it's going to actually be like once you chew on it for a while. We'll pass on that one. Okay, I think there's at least one more seedling on another tree that I need to taste because somebody just asked me about it. Okay, this branch here is a seedling that I salvaged and grafted onto this tree and just wrote triceratops on the tag, and it's been sitting here ever since trying to grow some apples. A bunch of these are actually pink parfait up here, but this would be triceratops, I think. Whoa. Ah. Wow. Okay, so as far as tannin goes, very high tannins, like dry your mouth out, like my cheeks are stuck to my teeth right now. But nice red flesh fruity flavor. I think this is still a little starchy, so I don't think it's fully developed yet, and that means it's probably going to get more flavorful. It looks like it drops a lot of apples early. Very delicious. Not as strong as the first year I tasted it, but very delicious. Dang, it's just hard to talk with your mouth all puckered out with that tannin. You have to give me a second. As far as flavor goes, it isn't as strong as it was the very first year I tasted it, was really, really strong. But it is quite strong, and it has a lot of nice berry flavors, like almost on par with like black strawberry, Appaloosa, grenadine, that kind of leaning in that direction. And again, I'm not even sure that this is actually all the way ripe, so it could get more pink, more flavorful. Boy, the tannins are just hardcore in this apple. So I think this really has cider potential, and that it should be, it should be tested. I don't know, how it's going to perform for cider, or how strong this flavor is going to be, in different years, if it's more ripe, somewhere else versus here. It does get scab pretty bad. It gets sunburned a lot here in California in the hot sun. You can see sunburn there. I picked off a bunch that were sunburned. It doesn't seem like a very healthy apple. You can see the leaves are all spotty and probably with scab infection. But if I were to send out a bundle of, cider apples for you cider people to test, I would conclude this probably because it seems like it has pretty high potential with all that tannin, interesting flavor, pink flesh. Seems like there's sugar in it. Let's test the sugar. I can't tell how ripe it is because of all the tannin. It's harder for me to tell like that starchy mouthfeel that you get is just, I can't really get it. Maybe because it's not there, maybe because of the tannin. It's kind of weird, but triceratops is kind of a cool name. Sort of a cool name for a cider. I'd buy it. I'm at 19. Readings seem a little low this year, so it may sweeten up a bit. Don't expect that where you live unless, you also have very dry conditions and really bright sunlight like I do. There you go. That's triceratops. This is the beginning of what may someday be a prickly pear breeding project. Most of these should be fruit-producing varieties. Some of them actually have names, named varieties. Other ones, I'm not quite sure. There's probably some duplicates in here. Phase 1 is to collect a bunch of them, grow them out to fruiting size, start to assess them, and then think about crossing them. I don't know how much breeding effort there's been put into these things, but I'm kind of guessing that there's a lot of potential that's untapped. And hopefully, like apples, finding a bunch that have different flavors and different qualities and maybe hybridizing some species and stuff like that. So we'll see. It's not a project I'm going to take like real hardcore serious, but I think it's a great fruit and has a lot of potential. The worst thing that'll happen is I'll collect a bunch of these, plant them, grow them out, have a bunch of prickly pear fruit and never do anything with it. Okay, this is the nursery row for apples that I'm planning to take with me when I move. And as you can see, this is 1 year from grafting. A lot of these were just little tiny twigs. They grew very well. Some of them are probably taller than me. Yeah, this one's a little bit taller than me. And man, they're going to grow fast. So I better move pretty soon because if these are in the ground even 2 years at this rate, like next year I may try to slow them down a little bit. But I also will probably be using these to do fruit tree training experiments. If not experiments, then just replicating what I already do to see how well it works on a large number of seedlings at one time. Because this is what you want to be training, is this right here. These nice tall shoots like that. A bunch of these are new seedlings. Like these whole first 2 rows and part of the next row, maybe even most of the next row, are all new seedling apples. I'm not sure what I'm doing with those training-wise because I want them to grow a lot in order to come into fruit. And then a bunch of these over here are named varieties, stuff that I've had for a long time that I want to breed with. It could be like, Allen's Everlasting, King David, just the stuff that I usually grow and talk about a lot and use for breeding. I want to get started as soon as possible at my new place with trees that are already, ready to rock. So taking something like this, which is Roxbury russet, a famous American russet, and getting to train this in the first year. We have this nice tall whip. It's big enough and tall enough to get every branch where I want it, and I can apply my methods and test them out on all these ones that are tall enough this year. Moving them after 1 more year of growth should be fine. Each year after that, it's going to get sketchier and sketchier, and also in terms of training them in these super crowded rows, it's just gonna fill into one big block of mess. And then these guys are all seedlings that stuff I grew from seed. A lot of them are not particularly interested in. I'm really interested in this one because this is the trait I'm looking for, is these real blocky things where the sides are filled out versus like this where it has these deep grooves in the ribs. So some of these, like this one, I'm interested in, but a lot of them I'm just using for rootstock, and I've grafted on mostly King Tubby, which is my favorite, best seedling so far out of like literally thousands and thousands of seedlings. Maybe it's probably over 10,000 certainly at this point, but I'm not sure if it's over 20,000. And just, I try to select out the stuff I'm most interested in, and King Tubby's kind of the king of that lot. Here's a nice looking specimen here. So this is grafted right there. And I just grafted a whole bunch of those to propagate them because people will buy these cuttings, and I can help fund my homestead project. They didn't grow as much as I hoped this year, but if they can survive the winter, which I have no idea how they're going to do, next year they should grow pretty good, and I'll have some cuttings available. And this is another one of my seedlings. I call it Gordita, and it does the same thing where you can see how fat it is already and filling out. Like, look at these grooves on this mature cactus. And then this one, like 1 inch from the top, it's almost flat already. So yeah, maybe we'll get in here again with you guys to check the very late stuff and some of these like potential cider apples in the Lady Williams block there. Lady Williams X Grenadine. Look at that tree, the real tall one. That is that Grenadine X Gold Rush 1110. Yeah, that thing is incredibly vigorous, and it looks like it may have some scab resistance. I forgot to mention that, but these ropes of apples in here hanging off of it look perfect. Let's see actually if we can find any scab on these at all. You know, being way down here on the bottom, they're close to the ground where, you know, all the scab spores are. And, you know, they look pristine. They look absolutely pristine. This color is probably all or almost all flesh color showing through the translucent yellow skin. Like, see, this one, for whatever reason, isn't developing the pink flesh, so it just looks yellow. That's actually yellow too. It's just that you're getting this color, and that's the same as grenadine and pink pearl and now pink lemonade and lots of other apples, vanilla pink included. Next video, if I get to it, we'll be going through all the other varieties, heirlooms and other named varieties, see what's out there, talk about it, and test out some stuff that I've never tasted before, haven't tasted much, to get some notes on what I might want to be leaving here and taking with me.